There's a moment in everyone's life when pride needs to pack its bags and make room for survival. Mine arrived on a rainy Tuesday in April at 2:37 p.m. when my phone rang displaying an unknown number, and an extremely professional female voice offered me exactly what I needed most: an impossible job. Impossible because the salary had 3 more zeros than anything I, Emma Castellano, holder of a business administration degree from a public university and unemployed for 7 months, could dream of. Impossible because the position was for executive assistant to the feared, hated, and absolutely infamous Richard Hawthorne, the man who had built a billion-dollar empire in technology and apparently destroyed the self-esteem of every employee who crossed his path. "Ms. Castellano?" the voice repeated from the other end of the line. "Are you still there?" I was, frozen on the worn couch of my 400-square-foot studio apartment, wearing pajamas at 2 in the afternoon because there was no reason to get dressed, mentally calculating how many overdue bills that salary would pay. All of them. It would pay all of them, with enough left over to buy real food instead of instant noodles. "Yes, I am," I replied, trying to sound professional and not desperate. "But I need to ask, why me? My resume isn't exactly brilliant." Silence on the other end, then a sigh. "To be frank, Ms. Castellano, you're the 19th candidate this month. The other 18 didn't last. Mr. Hawthorne has very specific standards and a difficult temperament, but your letter of recommendation from Professor Dalton was exceptional, and your online psychological assessment showed uncommon resilience." A pause. "Plus a surprisingly high score in tolerance for challenging personalities." I translated mentally. "You can handle insufferable people, and you're desperate enough to try." She wasn't wrong. "When do I start?" I asked, and that's how I sold my soul. Or at least that's what I thought at the time. 3 days later, I stood before the Hawthorne Tech Building, a mirrored glass skyscraper that seemed to have been designed specifically to intimidate. My black thrift store suit was well pressed, my briefcase, borrowed from my sister, pretended to be genuine leather, and my confidence was pure simulation. The lobby was a study in intimidating minimalism: marble, brushed steel, and a silence that seemed to suffocate any audacity. The receptionist, a woman with platinum hair pulled into a bun so tight it must cause headaches, assessed me with a look that clearly said, "Another lamb to the slaughter." "Emma Castellano," I announced, keeping my voice steady. "First day as Mr. Hawthorne's executive assistant." She pressed her lips into a thin line that could be considered a smile only by someone very optimistic. "23rd floor, elevator on the right. Mrs. Pemberton is expecting you." Mrs. Pemberton, I discovered upon emerging on the 23rd floor, was the woman who had called me. She was everything I would imagine of a senior executive: impeccable charcoal gray suit, heels that increased her already considerable height, and an expression that blended genuine sympathy with poorly disguised pity. Ms. Castellano." She extended her hand, her grip firm and professional. "Vanessa Pemberton, Director of Human Resources. I see you're punctual. Excellent. Mr. Hawthorne detests tardiness almost as much as he detests, well, most things. Great start." She guided me down a corridor with white walls decorated with abstract art that probably cost more than my entire apartment, while bombarding me with information at a speed that suggested limited time. "Your office is here, adjacent to his. You'll manage his entire schedule, filter all calls, organize all meetings, and essentially ensure his day flows without interruptions. He detests interruptions. He also detests cold coffee, blue pens, people who breathe loudly, meetings after 5 p.m., and anyone who dares disagree with him without having solid data to support their opinion." I could barely take mental notes of everything. "Are there things he likes?" I ventured. Mrs. Pemberton gave me a look that could be considered amused. "Efficiency, silence, and triple espresso at 7 a.m., noon, and 4 p.m. exactly at 85 degrees Celsius. He measures the coffee temperature, escaped before I could filter, only once." Her smile was small and private. The assistant who served coffee at 80 degrees didn't return the next day. My stomach knotted. She stopped before double dark wood doors. Through the frosted glass, I could see the silhouette of someone standing before a panoramic window. "Some final advice," Vanessa said, her voice dropping to an almost conspiratorial tone. "Don't take it personally. He treats everyone the same horrible way, so it's not about you. Keep responses short and objective, never ever cry in front of him. And if you need to cry, my office has an excellent tissue box and soundproof walls." That should have been comforting. It wasn't. "Ready?" she asked, her hand already on the doorknob. "No, absolutely not." But I nodded anyway. The door opened, revealing an office that was more modern art gallery than workspace. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below like a living painting. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive functionality. And before the window, with his back to us, stood him. Richard Hawthorne was taller than I expected. The dark gray suit cut with a precision that suggested a personal tailor. Even from behind, he emanated an authority that made the air feel heavier. "Mr. Hawthorne," Vanessa began, "your new assistant, Emma Castellano." He didn't turn immediately. For long seconds, he continued studying the view, hands in his pockets. When he finally turned, I felt my breath catch. Because Richard Hawthorne wasn't the middle-aged man with a prominent belly I had imagined. He was, at most, 35 years old, with an angular jaw, black hair combed back revealing a high forehead, and eyes of a stormy gray that seemed to catalog and judge every detail of my existence in milliseconds. And he was handsome. Not just attractive, but in that kind of architectural and cold beauty you see in museum statues. Perfect, unreachable, and vaguely threatening. "Ms. Castellano," he said, his voice coming out like ice over stone. "You're the 23rd. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. 20th, actually, sir. 3 quit before starting. A muscle tightened in his jaw. His eyes narrowed a fraction. "Wit. Interesting." He walked to his desk, each movement economical and deliberate. The last assistant thought wit was appropriate. She lasted exactly 4 hours. I swallowed hard, but kept my gaze steady. "Then I guess my goal is to last 5, sir." The silence that followed was absolute. Mrs. Pemberton beside me practically stopped breathing. Richard Hawthorne studied me with an intensity that made me feel like a laboratory specimen. Then, surprisingly, something changed in his expression. Not exactly a smile. This man had clearly forgotten how to smile, but perhaps a micro-relief in the tension around his mouth. 5 hours would be a record, he said dryly. "Your office is next door. Vanessa will give you the access credentials. I need the European Division's quarterly report reviewed by end of day, 15 calls returned in order of strategic priority, and a complete list of conflicts in next week's schedule with proposed solutions." He paused, his eyes piercing mine. "Any questions?" "About 100. I asked the only one that mattered. What time do you consider end of day, sir?" "When the work is complete, Ms. Castellano, not when the clock dictates." Of course it would be like that." "Understood, sir." He nodded, a clear dismissal, and was already turning his attention back to the computer screen before I even turned around. The next 5 hours were a tornado of information, passwords, systems, protocols, and growing panic. The quarterly report was a 147-page document in technical English about markets I barely knew. The 15 calls were to CEOs, investors, and inexplicably, the ambassador of some country I couldn't identify. His schedule was a nightmare of triple conflicts and overlapping commitments that seemed physically impossible to fulfill. But something strange happened while I worked. I got into the rhythm. My brain, idle and underutilized for months of unemployment, awakened like a well-oiled machine. I created prioritization spreadsheets. I identified patterns. I proposed solutions. And when Richard Hawthorne walked through my door at 6:23 p.m. demanding an update, I had answers. He stood in the doorway, clearly expecting to find me in tears or already gone. Instead, he saw me sitting upright, with 3 monitors open and a printed list extended in his direction. Report revised, formatted, and with footnotes for the 3 discrepancies I found in the German division data, I reported efficiently. 15 calls returned, notes from each conversation in the system. The schedule has 19 conflicts, 17 of which can be resolved with virtual meetings or delegation. For the remaining 2, I suggest, I paused because this was the risky part, that you decline Thursday's charity dinner and Friday's conference. Neither offers strategic ROI compared to the conflicting meetings. Silence. Those gray eyes studied me with renewed intensity. You're suggesting I refuse an invitation from the Ashford Foundation? His voice was dangerously low. Whose president is one of this company's largest investors? My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. I'm suggesting that your presence at the meeting with the Japanese consortium is worth $300 million in potential contracts, while the charity dinner, though important for public relations, could be represented by Mrs. Pemberton without negative impact. I took a deep breath. But it's just a suggestion based on available data, sir. The decision is yours. Another silence. Longer. Heavier. Then Richard Hawthorne did something that Vanessa would tell me later no one had seen in months. He sat down, in the chair in front of my desk, as if he were a colleague and not my intimidating boss. You read the entire report? It wasn't a question. In 5 hours you read, reviewed, found discrepancies, and completed all the other tasks. Yes, sir. Previous assistants handed me the report without reading it, hoping I wouldn't notice. I would notice if I were you, I replied honestly. So I assumed you would notice too. Something passed across his face. Too quick to identify, but it almost seemed like surprise, perhaps respect, or just indigestion. It was impossible to say. You lasted 5 hours, Ms. Castellano. He stood, smoothing his non-existent wrinkles. Let's see if you last until tomorrow. He left, leaving only the subtle scent of expensive cologne and my racing adrenaline. Vanessa appeared at the door minutes later, eyes wide. What did you do? She whispered, urgent. He sat in front of you. Richard Hawthorne sat voluntarily. I did my job? I replied, uncertain. She shook her head, a mixture of admiration and concern. Honey, you don't understand. You might be the first assistant in 2 years to see him as something beyond an impossible tyrant. She paused. Or you might be the next one running out tomorrow morning. With this man, it's always one of the two. As I turned off my computer and grabbed my borrowed briefcase, I looked through the glass wall that separated my office from his. Richard Hawthorne was once again before the window, a solitary silhouette against the orange evening sky. And for the first time I wondered, what transforms a man into such a feared tyrant? What kind of pain does someone carry to build such high walls? I didn't know then that I would spend the next months finding out. That this cold and impossible man harbored secrets that would make my heart shatter and rebuild itself. That beneath that impenetrable armor was a heart that had simply forgotten how to beat right. But that night, on the rainy Tuesday that changed everything, I knew only one thing. I had survived the first day. And strangely, inexplicably, I wanted to survive the second one too. I survived the second day, and the third. And by the end of the first week, I had achieved what Vanessa called statistically impossible. I hadn't cried, quit, or been fired. Not that Richard Hawthorne made it easy. The man was a perfectionist tyrant wrapped in expensive suits and impossible standards. He criticized my coffee temperature, my font choices, the way I answered phones, and once, memorably, the pace at which I walked down the hallway. Ms. Castellano, he'd said without looking up from his tablet, you walk like you're apologizing for existing. Walk with purpose or don't walk at all. I'd wanted to throw my 3-inch heels at his perfectly groomed head. Instead, I'd straightened my spine and marched past him like I owned the building. The tiniest quirk of his lips suggested he'd noticed. Whether that was approval or amusement at my audacity, I couldn't tell. But here's the thing about Richard Hawthorne that nobody warned me about. Beneath the ice-cold exterior and the cruel efficiency, there were cracks. Small ones, barely visible. But once you knew where to look, you couldn't unsee them. Like how he never ate lunch. Ever. He'd work straight through, surviving on espresso and what I suspected was sheer stubbornness. On my 4th day, I'd placed a sandwich on his desk during a phone call. He'd glared at it like it personally offended him, but an hour later the plate was empty. The next day I did it again. Same glare, same empty plate. By day 6, he stopped glaring. By day 8, I caught him almost nodding in acknowledgement. Progress, I told myself. Glacial, microscopic progress. Then came the coffee incident. It was a Thursday morning and I'd barely slept. My neighbor's karaoke obsession had kept me awake until 3 a.m., and I was running on fumes and desperation. I prepared Richard's 7 a.m. espresso like always. Triple shot, 85 degrees exactly, and delivered it to his desk. He took one sip and went completely still. Ms. Castellano. His voice was arctic. What temperature is this coffee? My sleep-deprived brain scrambled. 85 degrees, sir, like always. Try again. I blinked. Had I messed up? Impossible. I'd used the thermometer, checked it twice. Oh no. 80 degrees? I whispered, my stomach plummeting. 79.3 to be precise. He set the cup down with deliberate care. Would you like to explain how, after maintaining perfect consistency for 8 days, you've suddenly forgotten basic instructions? The exhaustion, the stress, the week of walking on eggshells, it all crashed over me at once. And before I could stop myself, the truth tumbled out. My neighbor was singing Celine Dion until 3 in the morning. My shower broke, so I had to wash my hair in the kitchen sink. The subway was delayed 40 minutes, and I'm running on 2 hours of sleep and coffee that I made at 5 a.m. because my coffee maker is apparently also against me. I sucked in a breath. So yes, sir, I messed up your coffee by 0.7 degrees, and I'm sorry, and I'll remake it immediately, and it won't happen again. Silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. Richard Hawthorne stared at me with those storm-gray eyes, his expression unreadable. I'd done it. I'd finally cracked. I was about to become assistant number 21. Then he did something that stopped my heart. He laughed. Not a polite chuckle or a condescending snort. An actual laugh. Short, surprised, and almost rusty, like he'd forgotten how the mechanism worked. Celine Dion, he repeated, something almost resembling amusement flickering across his face. At 3 a.m. The full Titanic soundtrack, I confirmed miserably. Twice. He stood, picked up the offensive coffee, and walked to his private espresso machine. Ms. Castellano, go home. My heart stopped. Sir, Go home, sleep for 4 hours, and return at 1 p.m. He started making a fresh espresso, his back to me. Exhausted employees make mistakes. Mistakes cost money. Therefore, you sleeping is economically sound. He paused. Also, call maintenance about your shower. The company has a discretionary fund for employee emergencies. Use it. I stood frozen, unsure if I'd heard correctly. That's an order, Ms. Castellano. You're wasting time standing there. I practically ran to grab my bag, but at the door I turned back. He was standing by the window again, fresh coffee in hand, silhouetted against the morning sun. Thank you, sir, I said quietly. He didn't turn around. Thank me by returning with properly tempered coffee and functional critical thinking skills. But as I left, I could have sworn I heard him mutter, Celine Dion, good God. When I returned at 1 p.m., showered, rested, and significantly more human, there was a note on my desk in sharp, precise handwriting. Maintenance scheduled for your apartment 6 p.m. tonight. Invoice sent to accounting, RH. Something warm and confusing bloomed in my chest. The afternoon passed in its usual chaos of calls, meetings, and Richard's particular brand of demanding efficiency. But something had shifted. He was still exacting, still impossible, still terrifyingly brilliant. But the edge had dulled, just slightly. At 5 p.m., as I was preparing to leave, his voice came through the intercom. Ms. Castellano, my office. I grabbed my tablet and entered. He was reviewing contracts, red pen in hand, his focus absolute. You've lasted 2 weeks, he said without preamble. That's longer than anyone in 18 months. Thank you, sir. It's not a compliment. It's an observation. He set down his pen and finally looked at me. You're efficient, competent, and you don't waste my time with emotions or excuses. Except for this morning's Celine Dion confession, which was—" He paused, seeming to search for the word, "acceptable. I'll try to keep my musical catastrophes to a minimum." Was that almost a smile? No, couldn't be. See that you do. He returned to his contracts, then added, almost as an afterthought, "The coffee this afternoon was perfect." It shouldn't have felt like a victory. It was just coffee. But walking out of that office, I felt like I'd climbed Mount Everest in heels. Vanessa caught me at the elevator, eyes bright with curiosity. "What happened?" "He's been almost civil all afternoon. People are concerned." I made bad coffee, confessed to a Celine Dion tragedy, got sent home to sleep, and came back to fixed plumbing. She stared at me. "Emma, honey, I've worked here for 6 years. Richard Hawthorne doesn't do compassion. He doesn't send people home to rest. He certainly doesn't fix their apartments." She gripped my arm. "What is happening?" I didn't know. But as I left the building and found a company car waiting to take me home, another impossibility arranged by my impossible boss, I realized something terrifying. I was starting to see past the armor. And worse, I was starting to care about what I found underneath. This was supposed to be just a job, just a paycheck, just survival. So why did it suddenly feel like something much more dangerous? 3 weeks into my employment, Vanessa dropped a bomb on my desk in the form of an elegant black envelope. "The annual Hawthorne Tech Charity Gala," she announced with the enthusiasm of someone announcing a root canal. "Next Saturday, black tie, mandatory for all executive assistants." I stared at the invitation like it might bite. I don't do galas. Neither does Richard, but he hosts it anyway. She perched on my desk. "Fair warning, he'll need you there. Last year's assistant had a panic attack during the silent auction and hid in the coat check for 2 hours. That's comforting." Also, Vanessa's expression turned serious. "You'll see a different side of him that night. The public Richard Hawthorne, charming, polished, perfect. It's unsettling if you're used to the office version." I couldn't imagine Richard Hawthorne as charming. Brilliant, yes. Intimidating, absolutely. But charming? That required warmth, and the man was walking permafrost. "I'll manage," I said with more confidence than I felt. Saturday arrived too quickly. I'd found a simple black dress at a consignment shop, elegant enough not to embarrass myself, affordable enough not to destroy my rebuilding savings. Standing before my bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. Hair styled, makeup applied with shaky hands, heels that made me 3 inches taller and significantly less stable. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Car arrives at 6:30 p.m. You're seated at the main table. Don't be late." RH. He'd sent me a car and put me at his table. This was either a sign of trust or a strategic positioning for easy access to his demands. Probably the latter. The gala was held at the Rothmore Grand Hotel, all crystal chandeliers and old money elegance. I arrived to organized chaos, donors, executives, society pages, darlings, all glittering and air-kissing like they were in a movie about rich people. And there, holding court near the bar, was Richard Hawthorne. Vanessa was right. This version of him was unsettling. He wore a tuxedo like it was designed specifically for his frame. His usual severity softened into polished charm. He laughed at something an elderly woman said, actually laughed, and the transformation was staggering. This man looked approachable, almost kind. It felt like watching a performance. His eyes found mine across the room, and something flickered in them. Assessment, acknowledgement, something else I couldn't name. He excused himself from his conversation and crossed the space with that economical grace that was purely him. "Ms. Castellano." His voice was low enough that only I could hear. "You're punctual. Good. You sent a car. It would be difficult to be late. I've seen people manage impossible feats of incompetence." His eyes traced over my dress with clinical efficiency. No warmth, just evaluation. "You clean up adequately." "You're too kind, sir," I replied dryly. Was that almost a smile? Before I could confirm, a photographer appeared, camera raised. "Mr. Hawthorne, one photo with your beautiful date." "Assistant," Richard corrected coolly. "Ms. Castellano is my executive assistant." But his hand had already settled on the small of my back, proprietary and warm through the thin fabric of my dress. The photographer snapped several shots before Richard steered me away with practiced efficiency. "Vultures," he muttered. "By Monday, society blogs will speculate we're engaged. How horrifying for you. For both of us. I don't date employees, and you're far too competent to waste time being tabloid fodder." He guided me toward our table. "Tonight, you'll smile politely, make small talk when required, and keep the predatory investors away from me during dinner. Think of yourself as a very well-dressed shield." "Romantic," I deadpanned. This time he definitely almost smiled. Dinner was an exercise in controlled chaos. Richard was magnetic when he wanted to be. All charm and strategic conversation, working the table like a conductor leading an orchestra. But I noticed the tells now. The way his jaw tightened when Mr. Rothschild mentioned his father. The microscopic flinch when someone touched his shoulder unexpectedly. The way his fingers drummed once, twice against his water glass when conversations veered toward the personal. "Your assistant is lovely, Richard," Mrs. Ashford observed, her calculating eyes on me, much less terrified than the previous ones. "Ms. Castellano has an admirable tolerance for difficult personalities," Richard replied smoothly. "I'm sitting right here," I interjected sweetly. The table laughed. Richard's expression remained neutral, but under the table his knee bumped mine once. Accidental or deliberate, I couldn't tell. After dinner, I escaped to the balcony for air. The night was cool, the city lights sprawling below like fallen stars. I was contemplating whether my feet could survive another hour in these heels, when a voice cut through the quiet. "Hiding, Ms. Castellano." I turned to find Richard standing in the doorway, bow tie loosened, looking more human than I'd ever seen him. "Regrouping," I corrected. "There's a difference." He approached the railing, maintaining careful distance between us. "You performed well tonight. The investors were impressed." I smiled and nodded. Hardly a performance worthy of awards. "You'd be surprised how many people can't manage even that." He was quiet for a moment, staring out at the city. "My father started this gala 30 years ago. Every year I stand in that ballroom and pretend to be him. Charming, effortless, beloved. Every year, I remember why I hated these events even when he was alive. The confession was so unexpected, so raw that I froze. This was the crack Vanessa warned me about. The moment the armor slipped. "Why do it then?" I asked softly. "Because the charity is genuine, even if the spectacle is performance. Because 300 sick children will receive treatment from tonight's donations. Because some legacies are worth maintaining, even when they feel like shackles." He finally looked at me, and in the dim light, his eyes were less storm and more ocean, deep and complicated. "My father was everything I'm not. Warm, charismatic, easy with affection. People loved him effortlessly. And you? People fear me, respect me perhaps. But love?" He laughed, bitter and quiet. "I built walls too high for that particular emotion, Ms. Castellano." My heart cracked a little. "Maybe you built them high enough to keep out the wrong people, but the right person—" I stopped, suddenly aware I was treading dangerous ground. The right person would climb. The silence stretched between us, charged with something I didn't dare name. "You should go inside," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "People will speculate. Let them." His eyes snapped to mine, sharp and searching. For a breathless moment I thought he might say something, do something. Then the shutters came down, the armor snapped back into place. "Monday morning, 7 a.m., don't be late." He walked away, leaving me alone with the city lights and the terrifying realization that I hadn't just seen past the armor. I was falling for the man underneath. Monday morning arrived with a crisis wrapped in an email marked urgent. "Tokyo deal is collapsing," Richard announced, bursting through my office door at 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes before I'd expected him. "Pack a bag. We leave in 3 hours. I blinked at my computer screen, then at him. We? The Japanese investors trust relationships, not video conferences. You've managed every document for this deal. You're coming. He was already turning away. Business attire, 1 week's worth. Car leaves at 10. But I don't have a passport ready, and I need to. Your passport is current. I had HR verify all emergency documents when you were hired. Hotel reservations are made. You'll have a company card by the time we reach the airport. He paused at the doorway. Ms. Castellano, this deal is worth $400 million. I don't bring assistants on international trips for companionship. I bring them because I need them. Don't make me regret the decision. He was gone before I could respond, leaving me with 3 hours to pack for a week in Tokyo with the most infuriatingly complicated man I'd ever met. The man I was definitely, absolutely not falling for. The private jet was obscene, all leather and luxury, a flying office that probably cost more than my entire neighborhood. Richard worked the entire flight, barely acknowledging my existence except to request files or coffee. Professional, distant, everything the balcony conversation wasn't. I told myself I was relieved. I told myself the distance was appropriate. I was lying. 14 hours later, we landed in Tokyo to a cascade of city lights and organized chaos. The hotel was predictably elegant, the Imperial, naturally, and my room was 3 doors down from Richard's suite. Dinner meeting at 8, he informed me in the lobby. Wear something respectful but memorable. These investors appreciate attention to detail. Anything else, sir? I asked, exhaustion making me bold. Should I juggle? Recite poetry? His eyes narrowed slightly. Save the wit for after we close the deal, Ms. Castellano. But as he walked away, I caught it, the tiniest quirk of his lips. He was amused. The insufferable man was amused. The dinner was at an exclusive kaiseki restaurant, all private rooms and ceremonial precision. I'd researched Japanese business etiquette on the flight, the bowing protocols, the gift-giving customs, the importance of reading silence. Richard had noticed, of course. You studied, he murmured as we waited in the foyer. You said attention to detail mattered. I also said you were competent. I'm rarely wrong. It shouldn't have warmed me. It did. The evening was a masterclass in negotiation disguised as a meal. Richard was brilliant, respectful yet firm, charming without being false, navigating cultural nuances like he'd been born to it. And when Mr. Tanaka made a subtle reference to a document detail that would have derailed everything, I slid the corrected figures across the table before Richard even had to ask. His eyes met mine across the table, and for one unguarded moment, I saw surprise, approval, something that looked dangerously like pride. We closed the deal over sake and handshakes at midnight. In the car back to the hotel, Richard was uncharacteristically quiet. Then, you saved that meeting. I just did my job. No. He turned to look at me fully. You anticipated a problem I missed, had the solution ready and delivered it without disrupting the flow. That's not just competence, Ms. Castellano. That's partnership. Partnership. The word hung between us, heavy with implications neither of us would address. The rest of the week blurred into meetings, negotiations, cultural tours arranged by the investors. And somehow, in the chaos of business, something shifted between us. Richard still barked orders and maintained his impossible standards, but the edges had softened. He asked my opinion in meetings, trusted my judgment. Once, when I nearly tripped on a temple's stone steps, his hand caught my elbow and stayed there longer than necessary. Thursday night, after a particularly grueling session with the legal teams, we found ourselves alone in the hotel bar. Richard nursed whiskey while I attempted to stay awake over green tea. Why were you unemployed for 7 months? He asked suddenly. Your skills are exceptional. The question caught me off guard. My previous boss took credit for my work, then fired me when I confronted him. No references, no network, no second chances in a competitive market. His loss, my gain. Richard swirled his whiskey. Though I imagine working for me isn't much better than working for a credit-stealing narcissist. You're demanding and occasionally terrifying, I said honestly. But you're fair. You notice the work. You value competence over ego, and you've never once taken credit for something I did. I met his eyes. You're difficult, Mr. Hawthorne, but you're not cruel. Something cracked in his expression. My father would disagree, so would my ex-fiancée, and probably 18 former assistants. Your ex-fiancée? The words escaped before I could stop them. His laugh was bitter. Victoria, beautiful, ambitious, perfect for the society pages. She loved the idea of Richard Hawthorne, the billionaire, the power, the prestige. But the actual man? He finished his whiskey. She called me emotionally unavailable, incapable of warmth. A brilliant machine in an expensive suit. She wasn't wrong. She was absolutely wrong, I said fiercely. You fixed my apartment without being asked. You sent me home to sleep. You notice when I've read reports thoroughly and when I'm struggling. You remember how I take my coffee. Those aren't machine behaviors, Richard. Those are human ones. I'd used his first name. The intimacy of it hung between us like a confession. Emma, he said quietly, and my name and his voice did dangerous things to my heart. We're in Tokyo on business. In 1 week, we return to New York, where I'm your employer and you're my assistant. That's all this can be. I know. But if circumstances were different... He stopped himself, jaw tightening. They're not. And wanting doesn't change reality. He stood, leaving cash on the bar. Get some sleep, Ms. Castellano. We fly home tomorrow. I watched him walk away, my heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. Because he'd almost admitted it. Whatever this was, I wasn't alone in feeling it. And that made it so much worse. Returning to New York felt like waking from a dream into harsh fluorescent reality. Richard retreated behind his armor so completely that I wondered if Tokyo had been a fever dream. He was back to Ms. Castellano, and clipped orders, back to impossible standards and zero personal conversation. I told myself it was better this way. Professional, appropriate. I was still lying to myself. 2 weeks after Tokyo, Vanessa appeared at my desk wearing an expression I'd learned meant trouble. Richard's college roommate is visiting today, she announced. Marcus Blackwell, tech investor, serial entrepreneur, and chronic flirt. Fair warning, he's going to hit on you. Everyone hits on you when Marcus is around because it annoys Richard. Why would that annoy Richard? Her smile was knowing. Oh, honey, you really don't see it, do you? Before I could demand clarification, the elevator chimed, and a man stepped out who could only be Marcus Blackwell. Tall, dark-haired, with an easy smile, and the kind of confidence that came from never hearing the word no. Handsome in a warm, accessible way that was the complete opposite of Richard's cold perfection. You must be the famous Emma, he said, crossing the reception area with his hand extended. Marcus Blackwell. I've heard absolutely nothing about you, which means Richard talks about you constantly. I shook his hand, confused. I'm not sure that logic follows. Trust me. I've known Richard for 15 years. The things he doesn't mention are always the most important. His smile widened. Has anyone told you that you have remarkable eyes? Because you do. Absolutely remarkable. Mr. Blackwell. Marcus, please, Mr. Blackwell is my father, and he's a significantly less charming individual. Marcus, I corrected, trying not to smile. Mr. Hawthorne is expecting you. Of course he is, probably timing how long I've been charming his assistant. He leaned closer conspiratorially. For the record, it's been 45 seconds and I'm already smitten. New personal record. I was saved from responding by Richard's door opening with enough force to suggest violence. Blackwell. Richard's voice could have frozen oceans. My office, now. Marcus winked at me before sauntering past. Missed you too, old friend. The door closed with a decisive click. For the next 3 hours, I tried to focus on work, while masculine laughter periodically erupted from Richard's office. Whatever tension existed between them apparently dissolved in private, though I caught Richard glancing through the glass wall at my desk more than once. At noon, they emerged for a lunch meeting. Marcus stopped at my desk while Richard retrieved his phone. Emma, I'm hosting a gallery opening Friday night. Contemporary art, overpriced wine, insufferable people pretending to understand abstract expressionism. You'd be a bright spot in the tedium. He produced a business card with elegant efficiency. My number, use it. Mr. Blackwell, we're already at Marcus, remember? Don't regress on me. Marcus, I amended, aware of Richard's eyes burning into my back. That's very kind, but she's working Friday, Richard interjected coldly suddenly beside us. The Singapore contracts require weekend review. Marcus's eyebrows rose. Since when do you work assistants on Friday nights? Emma, he's lying. There are no Singapore contracts. There are as of this morning, Richard countered. Convenient timing. Marcus smiled at me, deliberate and warm. The offer stands, Emma. If you escape the tyrant's clutches, call me. I promise infinitely better company. He left with a casual wave, leaving me alone with a Richard who looked like he wanted to put his fist through something expensive. My office, he said tersely. Now. I followed, my heart hammering. He closed the door with careful control, always careful, always controlled, and turned to face me. Marcus Blackwell is not someone you want to get involved with. I wasn't planning to get involved with anyone, sir. He's charming and reckless, and constitutionally incapable of commitment. Good thing I'm just being polite then. Polite. Richard laughed, sharp and humorless. Is that what you call smiling at him like he'd hung the moon? The accusation hung between us, electric and dangerous. I smiled politely at your business associate, I said carefully. The same way I smile at every client and investor who walks through that door. It's called professionalism. It looked like more than professionalism. And what if it was? The words escaped before wisdom could stop them. What exactly would that matter to you, Mr. Hawthorne? His jaw tightened. You're my assistant. Exactly. Your assistant, your employee, not your property. You made it very clear in Tokyo what the boundaries are. So unless this is about my job performance, which has been flawless, by the way, my personal life is none of your concern. The silence was deafening. Richard stared at me with those storm-gray eyes, emotions warring across his face too quickly to catalog. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. You're right. Your personal life is your own. Date whoever you want. Marcus, the mailroom clerk, the CEO of our biggest competitor. He turned away, facing the window. Just remember that Marcus Blackwell treats people like collectibles, and you, Ms. Castellano, deserve better than being someone's temporary acquisition. The tenderness in that last sentence broke something in me. Why do you care? I asked softly. His shoulders tensed. I don't. Liar. He spun around, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole my breath. What do you want me to say, Emma? That watching him flirt with you made me want to throw him through the window? That I've spent 2 weeks trying to forget Tokyo and failing spectacularly? That every morning I walk past your desk and have to remind myself of every reason why this, he gestured, between us, is impossible? My heart stopped, started, raced. Richard, I'm your employer. You need this job. I won't be the man who puts you in an impossible position because I can't control my... He stopped himself, jaw clenching. There are 18 former assistants who would tell you I'm incapable of this, of feeling anything beyond ambition and control. Maybe they're right. They're not. I stepped closer, every professional instinct screaming at me to stop. And Tokyo wasn't nothing. Whatever this is, it's not one-sided, which is exactly why it can't happen. But his eyes traced my face like he was memorizing it. You deserve someone who knows how to be warm, someone who doesn't need instructions to be human, someone like Marcus, probably. I don't want Marcus. Then you're even smarter than I thought. His smile was sad and small. Because you shouldn't want me either. Too late, I whispered. The confession hung between us, irrevocable and terrifying. Richard closed his eyes briefly, something like pain crossing his features. Go home, Emma. Take the weekend off. The Singapore contracts are fictional, and you've earned the rest. He returned to his desk, his armor slamming back into place. Monday morning, 7 a.m. I left before I could do something catastrophic, like cross that office and kiss him until the walls crumbled. But as the elevator doors closed, I caught one last glimpse through the glass. Richard standing at his window, head bowed, looking utterly alone. And I knew, with terrifying certainty, that everything had just changed. I spent Saturday cleaning my apartment with manic energy, trying to scrub away the memory of Richard's voice saying too late like it was a tragedy. Sunday I gave up pretending and just lay on my couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment since that rainy Tuesday in April. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of a reckoning. I dressed with extra care, armor of my own in the form of a sharp navy suit and the confidence I didn't quite feel. Walking into that office would require every ounce of professionalism I possessed. But when I arrived at 6:55 a.m., Richard's office was dark, empty. Vanessa appeared at 7:30 looking worried. He's not here? No. Should he be? Richard hasn't missed a day in 4 years, not for illness, not for holidays, not for his father's funeral. She pulled out her phone. He's not answering. Emma, something's wrong. My stomach dropped. Do you have his home address? I can't just give out. She stopped, reading my expression. You care about him. Really care. Vanessa, please. She scribbled an address on a sticky note. Penthouse at the Meridian. If anyone asks, you stole this from my desk. I grabbed my bag and ran. The Meridian's lobby screamed old money and exclusivity. The doorman took one look at my determined expression and wisely didn't try to stop me. The penthouse elevator required a key card I didn't have, but a maintenance worker took pity on my frantic explanation about a sick employer. Medical emergency, I'd said, which felt true enough. The elevator opened directly into Richard's apartment, and I stopped breathing. It was nothing like I'd imagined. No cold minimalism or sterile perfection. Instead, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves crammed with worn novels, a telescope by the window, abstract paintings that looked hand-selected rather than decorator-chosen, and photographs. Actual framed photographs of people laughing, living, loving. This was the real Richard Hawthorne, the one he never let anyone see. Emma? I spun around. Richard stood in the hallway wearing track pants and an MIT t-shirt, hair uncombed, feet bare, looking more human and vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. His eyes were red-rimmed, face drawn. What are you doing here? His voice was rough, unused. You didn't come to work. Vanessa was worried. I stopped. You look terrible. Flattery will get you everywhere. But there was no bite to it. He ran a hand through his hair, exhausted. Today's the anniversary. 5 years since my father died. I usually work through it, but this morning I couldn't. He trailed off, looking lost. My heart cracked open. Have you eaten? Emma. Have you? No. I dropped my bag and headed toward what I assumed was the kitchen. Then I'm making breakfast. Sit down before you fall down. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to. There's a difference. I found eggs, bread, coffee. Now sit, or I'm calling Vanessa to come yell at you too. He sat at the kitchen island, watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. I cooked in silence, hyper-aware of his eyes tracking my every movement. When I placed the plate in front of him, our fingers brushed, and electricity shot through me. Thank you, he said quietly. Eat. He did, slowly, while I made proper coffee. Not the triple espresso he survived on, but something gentler. When he finished, some color had returned to his face. My father had a heart attack in his office, Richard said suddenly. I found him, performed CPR until the paramedics arrived. They said he was probably already gone, but I couldn't. His voice cracked. I kept trying. Kept thinking if I just tried harder, fixed it better, controlled the situation better. Richard. I moved around the island, standing beside him. It wasn't your fault. Logically, I know that. But logic doesn't touch grief. He looked up at me, and the raw pain in his eyes destroyed me. He was everything I'm not. Everyone loved him. and I spent years trying to fill shoes that were never meant for me, building walls so no one could see how badly I was failing at being him. You're not failing. You're succeeding at being you. I touched his shoulder, tentative. Your father was warm and charismatic. You're brilliant and passionate and fiercely protective of the people you care about. Those aren't flaws, Richard. They're just different strengths. Emma. My name was barely a whisper. Why are you here, really? Because the thought of you alone and hurting made it impossible to breathe. The truth spilled out, reckless and necessary. Because too late keeps echoing in my head. Because I'm tired of pretending this is just a job when you're... I stopped, terrified. When I'm what? When you're the best part of my day, even when you're impossible and demanding and terrifying. Especially then, because it means you trust me enough to be real. I stepped back, creating distance. But you're right. You're my boss. I need this job. And I won't put you in a position where you feel obligated or guilty or... He stood so quickly the stool nearly toppled. Obligated? Emma, I've spent 2 months trying to convince myself that what I feel for you is just respect for competence. That the reason I can't focus when you're in the room is professional appreciation. That sending you home to rest and fixing your plumbing and remembering how you take your coffee are just employer responsibilities. He stepped closer, and my heart forgot how to beat. But Tokyo broke me. Seeing you handle those investors with such grace, having you anticipate my needs before I voiced them, watching you shine in that restaurant. He stopped inches away. And then Marcus, with his easy charm and uncomplicated warmth, making you smile like I never could. You make me smile, I interrupted. When you don't realize you're being funny, when you almost smile at my sarcasm, when you remember tiny details I mentioned once in passing. Those smiles are real, Richard. Everything with you is real. I'm your employer. The power dynamic is only a problem if one of us abuses it. I'm here because I choose to be. I can find another job. I can't find another you. The confession hung between us, irrevocable and terrifying. Richard's hand lifted, hesitated, then gently cupped my face. His thumb brushed my cheekbone with devastating tenderness. If we do this, he said softly, I can't promise easy. I'm difficult and demanding and emotionally complicated. I'll probably mess this up in 18 different ways. Good thing I have a high tolerance for challenging personalities. His laugh was surprised and genuine. When did I become the one being managed? Approximately 45 seconds after I met you. Emma Castellano. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. You're either the bravest or most foolish woman I've ever met. Can I be both? Absolutely. His smile was soft and real and devastatingly beautiful. I'm going to kiss you now. If that's not okay. I kissed him first. It was nothing like I'd imagined and everything I needed. Gentle and fierce, questioning and answering, breaking and rebuilding. His arms wrapped around me like I was something precious, and I felt the exact moment his armor finally crumbled completely. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Richard pressed his forehead to mine. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. The relationship part, the feelings part. Lucky for you, I'm an excellent teacher. I smiled against his lips. And you're an excellent student when properly motivated. Motivation. His voice was warm with amusement. Is that what we're calling this? Among other things. He kissed me again, slower this time, and I felt it in my bones. This complicated, impossible, beautiful man was mine, and I was irrevocably his. Everything had changed, and for the first time in months, neither of us was running from it. We returned to the office Tuesday morning in separate cars, maintaining the illusion of professionalism. But the moment Richard walked past my desk and our eyes met, something electric passed between us. A secret, a promise, a completely new reality. Vanessa noticed immediately. What happened? She whispered, cornering me at the coffee station. You're glowing. He's almost smiling. Did aliens replace you both? We talked. That's all. Talked. Her eyes narrowed, Emma Castellano, I've worked here for 6 years. Richard Hawthorne doesn't talk. He dictates, demands, and occasionally deigns to explain. Whatever happened. She stopped, reading my face. Oh my God. You didn't. Didn't what? You're in love with him. The words hung between us, impossible to deny. It's complicated. Honey, with Richard, everything is complicated. The question is it worth it? I thought about his vulnerable confession, the way he kissed me like I was oxygen, the feeling of his armor finally crumbling. Yes, absolutely yes. Her expression softened. Then I'm happy for you. Terrified but happy. Just be careful. Not because Richard would hurt you intentionally, but because he doesn't know how not to. She was right, and I was diving in anyway. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in restraint. At work, we maintained perfect professionalism. Mr. Hawthorne and Ms. Castellano, all business and boundaries. But the tension was exquisite torture. Every accidental brush of hands, every loaded glance across the conference table, every moment alone in his office where the air felt thick enough to choke on. We stole time where we could. Late dinners at obscure restaurants where no one would recognize us. Early morning coffees at his apartment before the city woke. Stolen kisses in the private elevator that left us both breathless and wanting more. This is unsustainable, Richard murmured one evening, his forehead pressed to mine in the darkened parking garage. I can barely focus in meetings because all I think about is how your mind works, how you challenge every assumption, how you... I kissed him quiet. 2 more weeks until the board meeting. Then we can tell HR, make it official, handle any conflicts of interest properly. 2 weeks feels like an eternity, says the man who once made me work 16-hour days without blinking. His smile was soft. That was before I knew what I was missing. But fate, apparently, had other plans. Thursday afternoon, Victoria Ashford walked into the office like she owned it. Richard's ex-fiancée was everything I'd imagined. Tall, elegant, devastatingly beautiful in the way of women born to luxury. Her smile was practiced perfection as she approached my desk. You must be the new assistant, Victoria Ashford. She extended a manicured hand. Is Richard available? We have lunch plans. My stomach dropped. He didn't mention, it's a surprise. We've been reconnecting lately. Her smile sharpened. Talking about old times, old mistakes, second chances. Before I could respond, Richard emerged from his office, and his expression went carefully blank. Victoria, I wasn't expecting you. That was rather the point, darling. She crossed to him with easy familiarity, kissing his cheek. You've been dodging my calls, so I decided to collect you in person. Lunch at Marcello's, just like old times. Something twisted in my chest. Richard's eyes found mine over Victoria's shoulder, apologetic, frustrated, trapped. Victoria, I have meetings. Cancel them. We need to talk. About us. About what we threw away. She looped her arm through his. Unless you're too busy playing corporate tyrant? I'll reschedule your afternoon, Mr. Hawthorne, I said, my voice professionally neutral even as my heart shattered. Take all the time you need. His jaw tightened. Ms. Castellano. It's fine, really. I turned to my computer, dismissing them both. I felt, rather than saw him leave, Victoria's perfume lingering like a poison. Vanessa appeared moments later. Emma, don't. My voice cracked. Just don't. He didn't invite her. You know that, right? Victoria's been calling for weeks. Richard's been avoiding her because... She stopped. Because of you. Then why did he just leave with her? Because Richard is an idiot about confrontation when it involves emotions. He'll tell her it's over. He'll be clear and final and probably brutal about it because that's how he handles things. She squeezed my shoulder. But he should have done it weeks ago, before letting you fall for him. The afternoon dragged like torture. Every minute felt like an hour. I completed work mechanically, my mind replaying Victoria's proprietary touch, her casual, darling, her talk of second chances. At 5:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Richard, my apartment. Please. I can explain everything. Pride said ignore it. Self-preservation said run. But love, stupid, stubborn, hopeful love, said go. I found him pacing his living room like a caged animal, still in his suit, tie loosened, looking wrecked. She ambushed me, he said immediately. I didn't know she was coming. I didn't invite her back into my life. But you had lunch with her. I had a 40-minute conversation where I explained in excruciating detail that we're over, that we've been over for 2 years, that I'm... He stopped, running both hands through his hair. She kept pushing, kept saying we were perfect together, that I just needed to try harder, that love wasn't supposed to be easy. Maybe she's right. The words tasted like ash. Maybe you're not ready for this, for us. Maybe I'm just... Don't. He crossed to me in 3 strides, cupping my face with both hands. Don't finish that sentence. Victoria was wrong about everything. Love isn't supposed to be easy, but it's supposed to feel right. And with you, Emma, everything feels right. Even when it's complicated and messy and terrifying. She's beautiful, sophisticated. From your world. She's also manipulative, emotionally exhausting, and spent 2 years trying to mold me into someone I'm not. His thumbs traced my cheekbones. You've never once asked me to be anything but exactly who I am. Difficult edges and all. I like the difficult edges, I whispered. They make the soft parts more precious. His kiss was desperate and tender, apology and promise tangled together. When we broke apart, he pressed his forehead to mine. I told her about you. Not your name, not details, but that I'm in love with someone who makes me want to be better without demanding I be different. He pulled back to meet my eyes. I'm in love with you, Emma. Completely. Inconveniently. Irrevocably. My breath caught. You love me? I've loved you since you defended my humanity to my face at 2 a.m. in a Tokyo hotel bar. Possibly since you lasted 5 hours on your first day and looked at me like I was a puzzle worth solving instead of a monster to survive. His smile was soft and real. I'm difficult and demanding and emotionally complicated, but I'm yours. If you'll have me. You forgot terrifying, I said, smiling through sudden tears. You're also terrifying. I'm terrified, he corrected quietly. Of losing you. Of not being enough. Of messing this up so badly you realize I'm not worth the trouble. Richard Hawthorne. I framed his face with my hands. You're worth every complicated, difficult, beautiful moment. And I love you too. Even when you're impossible. Especially then. He kissed me again and I felt it everywhere. The relief, the joy, the absolute rightness of finally saying the words out loud. Tomorrow, we tell HR. He murmured against my lips. Make this official. Let the entire company know that I'm completely, unprofessionally, inappropriately in love with my assistant. Former assistant, I corrected. I'll need to transfer departments. Vanessa suggested you'd be perfect as Director of Strategic Operations. Same floor, different reporting structure, significant raise. You discussed my career trajectory with HR? I've been planning for this since Tokyo. His smile was almost shy. I'm very good at strategic planning. And terrible at emotional timing. Which is why I need you. He pulled me closer. For everything. Forever, if you'll let me. Forever. The word should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like coming home. The morning we went public felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Vanessa met us in HR at 8 a.m. sharp, her smile knowing and warm. Well, it's about time. I was starting to think you'd keep sneaking around until retirement. Richard's hand found mine under the table. We wanted to handle this properly. Properly. Vanessa pulled out forms, already prepared. Emma, you'll transition to Director of Strategic Operations effective immediately. Different department, different reporting structure, equivalent salary to Richard's previous assistants plus 40%. Any questions? 40%? I blinked. You've essentially been doing 2 jobs for 3 months, Richard said calmly. The raise reflects actual value, not favoritism. Though the favoritism is definitely a factor, Vanessa added with a wink. Now sign here, here, and here. And congratulations, you're officially the first relationship to survive Richard Hawthorne. I'm sitting right here, Richard muttered. I know, I'm enjoying it immensely. By noon, the entire office knew. The reactions ranged from shocked to delighted to, surprisingly, smug. Apparently, several departments had been running a betting pool on when we'd finally admit it. You made me $100, the mailroom clerk told me cheerfully. I had before Christmas in the pool. Marcus called at 2 p.m., his laughter echoing through the speakerphone. I knew it. The gallery opening invitation was purely to make Richard jealous. Worked like a charm, apparently. You're a meddling menace, Richard said, but there was warmth in his voice. I'm a brilliant friend who recognized what you were too stubborn to admit. Emma, take care of him. He's emotionally fragile under all that ice. I'm hanging up now. Love you too, old friend. That evening, Richard took me to dinner at an actual restaurant. Not hidden away, not obscure, but a beautiful rooftop place with city views and open air. As we sat across from each other, his hand covering mine on the table, everything felt perfectly, impossibly right. I never thought I'd have this, he said quietly. The connection, the partnership, someone who sees past the armor and likes what's underneath. Loves what's underneath, I corrected. All the complicated, brilliant, impossible parts. His smile was soft and unguarded. I spent years thinking I was fundamentally broken, that my father's warmth skipped me entirely, that I was destined to be alone because I couldn't be easy or simple or uncomplicated. Richard, I squeezed his hand. You're not broken. You're just you. And you is exactly who I want. Even when I'm impossible. Especially then. Keeps life interesting. He laughed, genuine, full, the sound I'd worked months to earn. Emma Castellano, you walked into my life on a rainy Tuesday, lasted 5 hours when no one else could last 4, and somehow convinced me that maybe, just maybe, I deserved something good. You deserve everything good, I whispered. And I plan to spend a very long time proving it. His eyes held mine, gray as storm clouds, and just as beautiful. I love you, in case I haven't said it enough today. You've said it 17 times, I'm counting. Make it 18 then, I love you. I love you too. That's my 14th, in case you're tracking. I am. I track everything about you. He stood, pulled me to my feet, and kissed me under the stars while the city sparkled below. My brilliant, impossible, perfect Emma. Your difficult, patient, madly in love Emma, I corrected against his lips. And surrounded by strangers who didn't know our story, the rainy Tuesday, the coffee incident, the Tokyo trip, the gala confession, the breaking point, the beautiful rebuilding, we held each other and knew with absolute certainty, this was just the beginning. 2 years later, the sunrise over the Amalfi Coast was painting the sky in shades of gold and rose as I stepped onto the terrace of our honeymoon suite. Behind me, I heard Richard's footsteps. I'd learned to recognize them, the careful, measured pace that said he was thinking too hard about something. You're up early, Mrs. Hawthorne. I smiled at the name. We'd gotten married 3 days ago in a small ceremony. Just Vanessa, Marcus, a handful of close friends, and my sister, who cried through the entire thing. Richard had cried too, though he'd deny it if asked. Couldn't sleep. Too happy, apparently. His arms wrapped around me from behind, chin resting on my shoulder. I know the feeling. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this to be too good to be real. It's real. I turned in his arms. 2 years, and you're still impossible. Still demanding, still terrifying in meetings. And you're still brilliant, still challenging me at every turn, still making me want to be better without demanding I be different. We'd found our rhythm. Him as CEO, me as Director of Strategic Operations, partners in every sense. We fought about strategy and compromised on solutions. We challenged each other's assumptions and celebrated each other's victories. We built something together that neither of us could have built alone. Vanessa says the Tokyo expansion is ahead of schedule, I murmured. Because you restructured the entire timeline. Again. Brilliantly. Again. He kissed my temple. I'm taking you back there next month. Full team, major negotiations. Think you can handle it? Can you handle me handling it? His laugh was warm against my neck. Emma, I've never been able to handle you. That's why this works. Speaking of things working, I turned to face him fully, my heart hammering. I have news. The complicated, life-changing, terrifying kind. His expression shifted to concern. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Except I'm pregnant and we hadn't exactly planned this for year 1 of marriage. And I know you like to plan everything and... He kissed me breathless, then pulled back with tears in his eyes. You're pregnant? About 8 weeks. I found out yesterday, wanted to wait until... Richard, are you crying? No. He was absolutely crying. Yes. Maybe. I don't... Emma, we're having a baby? We're having a baby. His laugh was joy and shock and overwhelming emotion tangled together. I have no idea how to be a father. Good thing you're an excellent student when properly motivated. I used his own words from 2 years ago. And I'm an excellent teacher. A family. He pressed his forehead to mine, his hands cradling my face like I was something precious. You've given me everything I never knew I needed. The partnership, the love, the courage to believe I deserve good things. And now this. We'll figure it out together, I promised. Like we figure out everything. Together, he agreed. Always together. As the Italian sun rose higher, painting our future in shades of gold, I thought about that rainy Tuesday 2 years ago. The desperate job interview, the impossible boss, the 5 hours that became a lifetime. I'd walked into Richard Hawthorne's office looking for survival and found everything instead. Love, partnership, challenge, growth, and now, impossibly, perfectly, a family. I love you, Richard whispered against my lips. My brilliant, impossible, perfect Emma. I love you too, I whispered back. My complicated, wonderful, exactly right Richard. And in that moment, with the sea breeze and the sunrise and the promise of everything to come, we held each other and knew. This was our happy ending. And our beautiful beginning. The end